everybody, and welcome back to From This Corner TV. I'm Marilyn Dayton, your host and producer, and I'm so glad to see you. We've had over 3 years of shows together. Isn't that exciting? And I've got another great show for you tonight, okay? And I'm going to tell you about that. But first, I want to remind you, we're not here just to entertain you. We're here to bring topics that are of interest to you and that help educate you, as you well know. Okay, so tonight we're going to do a little bit of all of that, I think. So let me ask you this. Would you love to learn how to handle stress and pain? Okay, that's not fun, but it's true. We all have stress and pain. And actually change your relationship with yourself. I've been doing this on and off lately, and it's kind of cool. So we're going to find out today a little bit more about that, because our guest has done that in her life, and she helps other people do that. Her name is Dr. Bridget Cooper, and she has written 5 books, all spread out in front of us here, and we're going to be talking about all of them. 4 bestsellers on communication, conflict, change, and empowerment. Important things in all of our lives. And her latest, Little Landslides, which I've got here and I have read, is an amazing book about her life, about overcoming heartache and hopelessness with the power of the mind and the spirit to carry you upward. We all need to be lifted up. So, amazing book. She's a good, great writer.
Thank you.
All right, so welcome to the show, Dr. B.
Thank you. It's so nice
Okay, I got to ask you this.
Yeah.
You're a cage rattler,
Yes.
change strategist, and thought shifter.
Yes.
And, okay.
Do you
What
wanna
does that all mean?
So it's funny, the cage rattler thing. I mean, change strategist, I help companies and individuals create change in their organizations and in their person. So I help to figure out that roadmap and all the things that come about on that roadmap. The thought shifter, to get to change, you have to shift thoughts. You have to think of a new way of being and understand that you're responsible for those thoughts, and those thoughts create all of the change necessary for changing how you feel and then changing how you behave. The cage rattler thing came to me as I was driving, because I had a friend and colleague coach kind of person come to me and say, what are you? Like, what's your title? And I said, I don't know. And we pushed on it. And I was driving one day and I thought, I'm a cage rattler. And she said, "Ooh, I like it. Sounds juicy. What does that mean?" And I said, we are all in cages of our own design. We have all caged ourselves into these limited ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving, and therefore performing and living, that if we just got our cages rattled, if somebody could just let us understand that we have the key to get out, we could be out. So that's, and then I, of course, on my 4th book, I put a caged lion inside of that, because that's the symbol, which is we are all lions. We just have to figure out how to get out of those cages we put ourselves in. So,
And we do. And sometimes throughout our lives, we put ourselves in several cages several times.
oh yeah.
And we have to work our way out of it. One of my guests one time said that we change our thoughts about ourselves, we change our careers, we change our lives 7 or 8 times in our lives.
At least.
I
Yeah.
think I've done it a little more than that. But that's okay. That's okay.
Because we're creative.
You have to be. You have to find what you want to do, what you're supposed to do, and sometimes that changes, right?
Go with the flow. Yeah.
So you have a very ambitious mission,
I
and I
do.
want to make sure I read it right. It's
Yeah.
to change the world,
Yep.
one hopeful life, team, organization at a time.
You got it. You got it.
So let's take the 3 of those and talk about that.
Okay, so organizations are made up of people. They're not entities unto themselves, so they're made up of people. So when I go into an organization, I'm looking at the organization as a whole and as a system of relationships that are functioning together. But I'm also looking at each individual within the organization and the role that they're playing and how they're creating or not creating success for the organization. Then that starts at the entry-level person all the way up to the CEO. So looking at how the entire organization is functioning together. And within that organization and with those individuals are collective teams. So they're parts of this bigger cogged wheel, right? So I look at all of that and try to figure out, okay, where are the pain points, where are the problems coming from, and how can I step in to help provide a mirror, to hand them the keys to those cages that we talked about, so that they can create that change and live abundantly, prosper within their companies, and reduce some of the conflict and chaos that is defining a lot of companies and organizations.
Now you're talking about companies and organizations, businesses and...
Businesses, nonprofits. I've done, I think you have in my bio, my list of range in that. I mean, I've done work with Girl Scouts, Vietnam vets, the prison system, gun clubs, insurance companies, financial organizations. I mean, it runs the gamut. I mean, everybody has issues working together, figuring out what's in their way and figuring out how to get past some of those roadblocks. So I step in and help them. I've had countless organizations who are, and this comes about so much of, one part of the organization is saying, well, if only they would fix it over there. And then that part of the organization is pointing to another aspect of the organization, if only they would fix it over there. And then they're pointing to some other, and there was one company that years ago that I actually touched. Every part of the company, like every part of the organization contacted me and said, can you come do a staff retreat for us? Can you come do a staff retreat for us? Can you come do a workshop for us? And by the time I got to like the fourth or fifth point in this organization, I said, by the way, I've got a little secret to tell you. You're all blaming each other for the problem. Like, I haven't found the problem, because there is no the problem. You're all part of the problem, therefore you're all part of the solution. So getting people to recognize their own empowerment and where they start and end and what they can take ownership over creates a complete shift in how they operate. So,
and this is more than just the internal culture of a company.
Correct.
This is relationships.
Yeah, relationships, attitudes towards change, empowerment, communication, time management, organization. I mean, I hit it at all levels. We do strategic goal deployment, all the pieces that are necessary to be able to create change in an organization.
And did you have any special training for this particular type of work that
yeah.
you do, other than life?
Other than life. So my undergraduate is in human resources management. So I was an HR person for a number of years. And then I went back and got a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, which is underneath it systems theory. It's understanding how people function within a system and what the power dynamics are, what the roles are, how people take on those pieces, boundaries, power differentials, things like that. And then my doctorate is in educational leadership. So, and then through a series of just jobs and positions that I've held in leadership positions and with leaders and watching leaders and seeing leaders, I've just been consulting for 13 years on this. So it's been great journey.
You've had quite a journey
I
there.
have had quite a journey, and you talked
Learning
about
a
the
lot.
7 changes. I'm like, I think I've already done them.
Yeah, I think you have.
Yeah, touched them already. Yeah.
Now, I remember back in the 80s, they used to say, if there's more than one person, there's a relationship.
Correct.
And, you have to work on the relationship between and with two people.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we're actually talking about relationships with ourselves.
Oh, heck yeah. That's the first and most important one.
It is,
Yeah.
and we kind of glossed right over that back in the 80s. It was like, oh, yeah, you are who you are.
Right. Oh, absolutely. No, that's where I start. That's where I absolutely start, because there's so much unhealth in relationships and organizations and families and communities in our country, in our world, and it comes from one place in my experience, one place, which is this culture of victim, of being done unto, of this sense that we don't have the power within ourselves to change anything. We don't have the power of choice. We don't have the power to decide anything. And so my bottom line is that victims create more victims. And I'm here to show up in the world to say that we get to choose differently. We get to choose when we've been victimized to stay in that victim role, or to become the powerful force that we can be to create fewer victims, because victims, if they identify that way, become victimized over and over again, because that's the path that they're on, right? We've all had that process where, why does that keep happening to you? It keeps happening with you and for you, but it's because there's this path. And victims create more victims, because victims end up, and we know this by the corrections literature and more, that when people are victimized, if they stay in that victim mentality, they become either perpetrators and or re-victimize themselves over and over again. So it's just this power, this dynamic that I am just trying to root out from an individual and a corporate level, because I walk into companies and, like I said, this part of the company is blaming this part, because they're all seeing themselves as victims of somebody else's actions. And I go in there and go, okay, so what? So they might be doing that. They might be messing this up. So what are you going to do about it? How are you going to step forward and become mission oriented and find your power so that you can make change in this organization and in your own life? And they always take the lessons and bring them home. So, yeah.
Well, that's a good, what should we call that, byproduct?
Yeah.
Or
it's really my primary intention, because when people are happy in their life and happy as people, I say this, I make people better leaders by making them better people first. So when they're operating as better individuals in their own lives, in their own heads, in their own spirit, they're going to walk into an organization and make it better. That's just the nature of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a friend of mine, Liz Detterer. Do you know Liz?
Oh, absolutely.
Love her. She's got this statement. She says, "Holy shift."
Yes, holy shift. Yep, absolutely.
I love it. And I did a little work with her too, and we were in the conversation. It was supposed to be several hours. I think we were into it less than a half hour, and that's what I experienced. And I said, "Oh, this is what you're saying." She says, "Yes." And she told me later, she says, "It struck me. Now what are we going to talk about?" Because you got it.
She already shifted, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And you know, when someone like yourself goes into a company and you're looking at this dynamic of pain, problems, defensiveness, personal crises, you know, everything that exists there with these people. This is not something you can do overnight.
Oh, heck no. No, it took a whole lot longer than a day to manifest, so it's going to take some time to root out. But the source of that is I come at it from two perspectives. One is empowering individuals to have this thought shifting, to be able to see their power within any given situation, any given dynamic, and know where they begin and where they end, so that they can give up trying to change other people and take responsibility over changing themselves. So it's at the individual level. And then from a structural perspective, I hit it from the leadership perspective. So I do a lot of work with leadership assimilation and how the leader can create, you know, a good team, set a positive tone, you know, set a mission that people can follow and jump onto, because when they're led well, and they're empowered strategically, change occurs much more swiftly. But if you don't get both of those things working together, then whatever the intervention is, whatever the work that we're doing together can fall to the wayside.
And it'll walk out the door with you when you leave.
Right. Yeah. And that does me no good, because I again want to change the world, so they're not helping me. You know, if they're standing in the way of their own success, then that's not going to get us across the finish line.
So what kind of a process, time-wise, is this? You go in and you start working with them, and you work with them for several months?
It depends. It absolutely depends. So some companies have me come in and they just want to, the leader has had experience and they need somebody to kind of kick off and make the statements that they need to stand behind and be able to refer back to me as the person the powerhouse who walked in with the dynamic message and the irreverent sense of humor and, you know, the catchwords, and they're going to take it. And so he and I, or she and I, consult on the backside quietly, and while they take charge of the initiative. And then it'll run all the way from that end to they've got me engaged for a year and a half to be able to move change, because they've got a culture in crisis, they've got layoffs, or they've got reorganizations happening, or buyouts, or whatever that's going to thwart their process, and they need somebody on the ground, on site, or partially on site to be able to be that sounding board, kind of an organizational psychologist, as it were. So, yeah.
I can see of all of the different dynamics that you do run into, given the fact that we are all so different.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of different personalities, and you've got leaders, you've got managers who may not be managing well because they've got things in the way.
Correct.
You're fighting egos, you're fighting people who are carrying around their pain on their back in a backpack and their problems, and they're weighing them down, and they can't seem to climb out from under that.
Right.
I mean, this is quite a job you're talking
is
about
quite a
that
job.
you have to do.
I love it. I absolutely love it. The juicier, the better. It's funny because some of my colleagues who, they'll be doing some, one-off gig, or they're doing a different kind of work with an organization, and they run into this problem, and they call like the bat phone, the Bridget phone, and they're like, oh my God, have I got the problem for you? And they do it, and they know that when they're going to call me is when it's juicy and hard, and I'm going to get messy and in the mud, and the more that is, they're like, the more I need to call Bridget. If it's easy and it's simple and it's just, let's just shift this, let's just reorganize this, let's just do this, they're like, Bridget could do this, but she's not going to have much fun. But when it's messy and dramatic, and I mean, the more chaotic it is, the more I want to get in there and wrestle with it.
So it's kind of perfect for you, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And you brought up little landslides right in the beginning. I mean, my why and my background just lend themselves really beautifully to that kind of work.
Well, why don't we talk about that?
Well, we can.
Because here once again is her book. She has written these other ones, but this is about her.
Yep.
And you feel like you're right in there with her because she just puts it all out on the table.
I do.
And talk about pain and overcoming.
Yeah. Pain. Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us your story.
Yeah. So to talk about Little Landslides, I have to talk for a moment about the first 4 books because they tee it up. And the way that they tee it up is that the first book, Feed the Need, is about communication. Oh yeah, there she can grab it. Is on communication conflict, which is
Feed the Need.
Yeah, there you go.
There you
Feed
go.
the Need. And Feed the Need is about looking at conflict and communication in a different way, understanding that everybody comes with a core set of needs, and when they aren't being met, they're going to act in disruptive, destructive, dysfunctional ways that are going to disrupt things in an organization, in a relationship, in a home, in a community. And so looking at that and taking account of your own needs, and also respecting the fact that other people have their needs that are operating and sometimes in conflict, gives you a better, more respectful perspective on what that looks like. So I wrote that book to kind of say, okay, this is how I think about the world. This is how I'm coming at you, companies, organizations, so you understand my basis. So if we can kind of play together, if you can see the utility of this, then we can play together. And when I was presenting on that, a young woman came up to me at a workshop. I did like a 90-minute workshop on communication and conflict, and she said, I just wanted to let you know that you changed my life tonight. And I went, wow, personal record. I usually take like 3 hours to change lives, but 90 minutes, doing well here, right? So anyway, I said, you're gonna have to tell me more about that because that's pretty amazing. And she said, you gave me the tools tonight to face a girl who's been bullying me at school for a while. And I feel like I can go in there and I can hold my head high and I can manage her tomorrow. And I haven't felt like that.
Oh, wow.
And so she said, and then she followed that up with, do you have this book in teen edition? I was like, oh my God, you are brilliant. So I said no, and I like drove home, like don't tell the state police, like really fast that night. And I went home to Feed the Need, the transcript. I'm like, okay, how can I fix this to be a teen edition? And so I put out the teen edition, and she wrote the foreword. Love this girl, yeah, Katie Adriani. Anyway,
that is this one.
yeah, that's the teen edition. So she put that in her college transcripts. Yeah, she put that in with her college applications, and yeah, she's now in college. Just made 4.0 this semester. She's just just great. Anyway, so that was the story. The second one, and then in the midst of that, because I wasn't planning on writing that one at all until Kate came up to me and made that prophetic statement, I was writing Stuck You. And Stuck You is about change. And it's about, because I go into companies and I talk about change and I do change initiatives and I do change strategy. And so Stuck You, and which my daughters were horrified, by the way, that I called it Stuck You.
Stuck You.
Yeah,
okay.
But it's Stuck University because there's a period after the U.
Yeah,
but
I
yes,
see
it's
that.
edgy. It's edgy. but it's about the change process and how you can manifest change from the inside out, from an individual perspective within a contextual perspective. So it's a guide for individuals and for companies at the same time. So when I go into a company and I'm doing a change strategy initiative, I bring that book and they give it to their employees and they walk through the change process together. So that was that one. And then Power Play came out because, here, I'll hand you this one because it's way across. So Power Play came out because Power Play was my commentary on what is killing corporate culture, which are 3 factors: stress, drama, and isolation. The stress that we're feeling, the drama that's occurring within organizations and relationships, and the isolation that we feel, whether that's isolation from one another, from our teams, or from the work and or the mission. So it looks at how can we mitigate some of those factors, and there's a lot of statistics that I bring out and a lot of information that I provide in that. But the reason why I brought up all 4 of those books before I talked about Little Landslides is that Little Landslides is the book that I was always supposed to write. And when my grandmother said to me when I was younger, she said, "Bridget, I hope you're writing all of this down." And I said, "Well, I'm not maybe writing it all down, but I've got it all in my head." This was the book that she wanted me to write. Now, there are different ways of writing it, but she wanted me to write a book about my life that showed other people the way to get through, past, and rise upward from it in a way that she admired and respected. And that, I mean, it meant the world to me that she saw me in that way because I needed that mirror. And so Little Landslides came from that space. So.
Okay. Well, before we talk about Little Landslides,
because
that's a long story and it's on its own. And I think what we'll do is we'll talk about that in the second half of the show. But this Power Play, I see the lion shows up quite often with you. There's a lion there peeking through the cage.
Yep.
And it says, "Taming the World Circus from the inside out."
Absolutely, yeah. Because again, I'm biting a whip on the back picture, which everyone gets a kick out of.
I just looked at that picture with her biting a whip.
Biting a whip, yeah, it is. It's a bull whip, everyone. So, but yeah, lions are, and I talk about this jokingly in a lot of my presentations. But when I ask people, about different animals, they're different token animals. The 2 animals that I see that are most in contrast in organizations and with individuals are the squirrel and the lion. So the squirrel is like, it's got this frenetic, indecisive, all over the map energy. A friend of mine puts on his tagline on his emails, the road to indecision is littered with flattened squirrels, right? Because squirrels are just, they're running in the way and then they're like, oh, wait, no, I want to go the other way. And then they go that way. And so, and I used to joke, and I still do this on stage a lot, is I talk about my mother being a squirrel on like Ritalin or something. She was so, had this vibrational energy where you just, and what happens when you have a squirrel mentality, when you're coming from a squirrel perspective, is you don't have the power of decision. You don't have the power of intention. And so the contrast between the lion and the squirrel is that the squirrel is not calm enough, clear enough, intent enough to be able to bring their full power into any moment. So they're flitting about and getting run over in the process. Whereas the lion is conserving all of his or her energy for the moment that they need it. They are just watching, waiting, considering, pondering, knowing when that right moment is, and then acting. And so I want more lions out there, not because they tear the flesh from their victims, although that comes in handy sometimes, but because they are bringing their full power to every moment. And that is what is going to bring the change and the passion and the love and the healing and all of the things that we want in our relationships and ourselves and our companies and our world, if we're bringing the full power of ourselves to every moment. So that is what Power Play, that is what the work is all about, and that's why the lion is my token animal. But we'll also talk about the backstory to the lion image when we get to Little Landslides, because as you know, there's a lion on the back of Little Landslides for a very important reason too. So we'll get to how the lion has always kind of been with me. So
I love the way you think through everything.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
It's interesting because sometimes we see this and we do this and we think this far, and then there's this, and we maybe think in steps, but you're going like this and then coming back and then going like this and coming back and crossing over. I mean, your mind is very busy.
It is very busy. It had a lot of time to ponder. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I have done over the years and what I bring, the gifts that I bring to people and to the world is that I look at things from so many different perspectives, because that was the way that I survived, was by being able to see things from this vantage point and this vantage point and this vantage point and over here, so that I could try to solve problems that were beyond my scope of problem solving abilities. So that time, that consternation, that pondering, that visioning allowed me to be able to see it from a lot of different vantage points and to be able to try to bring solutions to things. And also in that, it gave me the ability to rest in the knowledge that I couldn't solve everything, but that I could at least try to see it well enough and broadly and specifically enough to be able to try to solve it when I could, and try to give people a calmer, more intentional, all coming from intention of what is it that, so I could operate out of knee-jerk reaction. I could just react to whatever it is that you've thrown at me. But if I want this goal over here, how am I going to get over there? And so being able to see it from all those places allows me to be able to cut through all the shaft that keeps us from seeing where is it that we really want to be and trying to direct our attention there.
And that's something that we all battle with, all the shaft and the stuff in the way of peaking and peaking.
Right.
And that makes sense to me because I've read this.
Yeah, well,
Yes. So I understand.
You have read-
I
you have read
understand
that.
totally what you're talking about.
Yep.
So this is a good spot for
Good
us
segue.
to take a little break. Okay.
Thank you.
And we're going to come back with Dr. B, and we're going to talk about why she says she was raised by wolves.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so hang in there. We'll be right back.
You always made sure I brushed my teeth.
You told me that smart was cool.
You always told me to dream big.
To all of those parents who took the time to make raising their children their most important job, we'd like to say,
Thank you.
Thank you.
From the bottom of my heart, thanks, Mom and Dad.
this message is brought to you by the U.S. Air Force.
If you keep tanning, indoors or out, the effects of harmful rays will show up on your skin. Wrinkles, age spots, and an increased risk of melanoma, the second most common cancer in women 15 to 29. Stop tanning. Time may not be on your side. Learn how to protect your skin at spotskincancer.org. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
You'd do anything to take care of that spot on your lawn. So why not take care of that spot on your skin? If you're a man over 50, you're in the group most likely to develop skin cancer, including melanoma, the cancer that kills one person every hour. Check your skin for suspicious or changing spots. Go to spotskincancer.org to find out what to look for. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
Oh, hey, bud. Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
With Gary and Todd?
Yeah?
I've been meaning to ask you, is there any drinking going on in this crowd?
No?
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't. I'd do anything to keep you safe.
Okay, I will.
I hope this is working.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Dr. Bridget Cooper, and we're going to hear her amazing story. And once again, you can find her books on her website, okay? And she's an amazing writer. And the Feed the Need is in both teen and adult formats, okay? So a lot of teenagers out there going through a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that book would most probably help them.
Yeah.
Okay, so keep that in mind.
Prevent all the problems. Yeah, if only if somebody had handed me Feed the Need when I was a teen, I can't tell you how many bad relationships I would have avoided. I can't tell you how many things I would have just, I mean, not that I wouldn't have screwed up things, because Lord knows I would have, but I would have really been able to prevent a lot of pain in my own life by being able to see things in a way that gave me more health and more empowerment and more clarity about the whys, like where all that stuff was coming from. And that would have helped me. So it's my gift back to try to, prevent some of that.
And I think it's great. It's needed. So okay, let's talk about this Raised by Wolves.
Okay. Yeah, so it leads right into little landslides. So a friend of mine, Ann Hampton, has used that phrase a lot. And when she said it, I said, we are soul sisters. Because being raised by wolves is just this, harsh reality of fending for yourself at some level and trying to figure out how to navigate the world without people who are really protecting you or guiding you in any way, but just kind of, let's just nomadically wander through the world and figure things out as we go. And that was really my upbringing, was this rough and tumble kind of figure it out. Yeah, just go, and being thrown to them. The wolves, as it were, to be able to figure that out. So that's what I did.
And when you read this book, you should read this book, okay? You have to read it slowly because it pulls you right in. You're just such a wonderful writer.
Thank you.
You express yourself so well that you're pulled right in, and you find yourself holding your breath.
Yeah, it's a hard read.
It's a hard read because the story is a hard story.
Yeah, it's funny because somebody asked me, they told me today, they said, I ordered your book. I plan to read it over the summer. And I said, I wish I could say enjoy it, but I'm really not able to say that at all because it's horrific. It's a horrific story, but it's the truth. And to set up the story itself, what I did was I spoke with a friend of mine again, Ann Hampton, who is a writer coach, and she said to me, she said, Bridget, you could write your story, and it could be from here, from birth to today, which is a whole lot of ground to cover, and people are going to be not bored to tears maybe because you've got a riveting story, but it just keeps going and going. So you've got to find what she called a container. So I thought about it and I thought, okay, so what is my container and what is my purpose for writing this book? And my purpose for writing the book was to show people by example that there's a way through the pain, that there's, you don't have to get stuck in it. You don't have to carry it around for the rest of your life. You don't have to throw it at everybody. Not that you're not going to mess up. You're not going to stumble and fall. You are, but that there's a way to get through it. So I had to come at it at some level from the Dr. B perspective of how do you do it, the how-to manual of it, right? But in order to make it really affecting people, to be able to really like reach into their guts and grab a hold so that they could pay attention to the message of this, I had to write it from a first-person perspective. But that container was, for me, about where did the pain start and where did the pain shift? Where was my pivot point in the pain? And for me, the pivot point in the pain was the start of the pain to the point at which I decided I wasn't going to try to kill myself anymore, that I wasn't going to try to get out of this life, that I was going to actually engage in it, that I was going to rest in it, and I was going to make something of my life. I was going to turn this pain into something useful for somebody else. And I remember walking into my psychologist's office when I was in college, when I had again decided no more suicide attempts. I'd had 3, one very serious, and I said, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to live through this. And I walked into her office and I said, I'm really grateful for the experiences that I've had, and you've read the books, you know what they are. And she was like, what? And I said, no, I'm really grateful because I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to make something out of this. I'm going to take my pain and I'm going to transform it into something that's going to help other people. I'm going to heal other people through my pain. That's going to make this worth it. And she's like, Alrighty then. So that was what we did, was walked through, like, how do I heal this? How do I let go of the stuff that's dragging me down, that's pulling me into that depressive state, that wanting to give up and wanting to just do what it was that my parents showed me to do, which was to numb it, deny it, wallow in it and let it kill us, because both of my parents effectively killed themselves. And how do I go about moving beyond that? So that was the container, and in that container, in those stories, I knew that in order to affect people the way that I wanted to affect them, I had to crawl up in my skin at those ages and tell the story firsthand. I had to have the readers see what I saw, feel what I felt, think what I thought, so that they could really be moved by it, to understand that I wasn't just going, and then when I was 3, this happened, and then because then it's like the pain's over here and you can't really get up to it. So in order to pay tribute to that so that it could be transformational for people, I did that. And it's a hard read. And as you know, the first 2 stories are written before memory. So there were the only 2, there are 16 stories, but the first 2 stories were written before a person would have conscious memory. And people have asked me, you might have, and I've cheated you out of your question, but how did I write those without having the memory of them? And it was, one, through narration by my mom, that I knew that those things had happened, that she had shared with me that those things had happened. But also I just sat and I said, I have to trust that the body remembers what the mind chooses to forget, that the memories are in me, right?
Yeah.
So I sat down at my computer, and before I opened it up and put my fingers to the keys, I said, just let the story come through me. Just let it be what it's supposed to be. And they were written in 10 or 15 minutes, both of those vignettes. I didn't think them, I didn't try them, I didn't push them, I just let them. They typed themselves. And so they are, and I give this disclaimer in the book, they are as true to form as I can make them. The others I remember clearly. Those 2 just came to the pages.
Amazing.
So,
amazing.
Yeah.
Can you share with us some of your pain so
Some
that
of
they
my
understand?
stories. Yeah, the context of that. So when I think I shared this at the meeting that you and
Yes,
I met at, somebody said, okay, Bridget, stop talking around it and talk to it. And I said, oh, all right, so you want me to get down and dirty with this. So my father began beating me when I was 8 weeks old for the first time. And those beatings continued until he stopped living with us when I was about 2.5. And during that period of 2.5 years, he would beat and rape me and my mother routinely. So there was a lot of physical, verbal, I'm sure, sexual, emotional abuse going on in that household. And that relationship continued through until the point of the story that they ended with at the age of 18, when I decided to live. Part of deciding to live was deciding to remove him from my life, because for all of those years, he was still coming in and out of my life and approaching me in desperate circumstances and sexual circumstances, and wanting to be saved by me, and at the same time not receiving my assistance. So that continual in and abandonment was just a very big picture in my life. And all of that was then marked by my mother's depression, my mother's alcoholism, my mother's sexual promiscuity and exposure for me, and all of the people who then saw me as this walking, talking victim and sensed me like, a wolf senses the weakest link in a pack, and sexually abused me during my, young years, age 6, 7, 8 years old. So all of that, that history was what was creating this just, oh my gosh, somebody stop this, somebody step in, somebody save me, somebody be my hero. And it wasn't until I reached 18 that I went, oh, no hero's coming. I'm going to have to be my own hero, because that's how that's going to work, because I'm sitting here by myself and nobody's stepping in for me. Nobody's got my back. And so, and not that I didn't have friends, and not that I didn't have angels, and not that I didn't have people showing up to the table, but each of them, unfortunately, was not able to step in the way that was necessary to be able to extricate me from what I was caught up in. So I had to. So I did. And so the book is about how do you do that. So the back of the book is the 6-step, 6-part process. And I hate to be kitschy like that about, 6 steps or whatever, but I broke it down into 6 components of trying to figure out how to rise up and let it be a beautiful thing that's happened to you versus the thing that creates more pain in your and everybody you touch's lives, because clearly that's who touched me, were other people who were in pain themselves. Yes. So
it's, as you can tell, it's quite a powerful story, and she tells it so clearly, so you can close your eyes and see it. And it's just so powerful. Yes, I had to then realize I was holding my breath as I was reading and put the book down and then breathe so that I could, recover, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's funny, so, and I want to ask you, I'm going to ask the interviewer a question. So in the book, because this is my life, so I've lived my life, I've seen the things, I've felt the things, I've experienced the things. So for me, they are here and they're still in my cells, but they're not shocking, right? They're not like I'm turning the page and wondering what happens next and being thrown off my chair by it. So I was really sensitive to the reader. I was really careful, and I wanted to be careful, one, about showing up in truth and in all of the raw honesty that I did, but also taking care of the reader. So at the end of each of the stories, I wrote a letter back to myself to try to let the reader know it's okay.
Yes,
she's
I know.
gonna be okay. And I did that, trying to it's okay. And even writing the book and showing my picture on the back side and and my, you could see my bio. I'm like, no, guys, I'm okay. So for those of you who don't know me or haven't seen me speak, I've really got my stuff together. I mean, I'm not perfect. I show up to things, a mess in my head sometimes, and I stumble over things, and I still have my demons.
It's called being human. Yes.
But I'm not the person who you might imagine me to be given those occurrences. I'm not walking around with my pain pack, just handing it to people or begging for it to be relieved. So those letters back to myself were this way of saying, one, this is what I wished I'd heard when I was there, because it would have saved me probably every subsequent pain. But also a way of telling the reader, this is the voice that I have now to heal that little girl who didn't have anybody holding her safe.
Yes, and that did kind of save the reader, really and truly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, sometimes I couldn't get through to that part.
Yeah.
Because I was inside watching this happen, and I couldn't do it. I had to stop.
Yeah. I had a number of people who actually contacted me, empaths, people who, one, have had, and I put a full-page disclaimer, as you know, in there that says if you have an abuse history, you're going to need to line up the troops, figure out the resources, have a speed dial person, you can call, because it's legit, it's hard stuff, but at the same time, empaths who feel like we feel, who can experience the pain in real time, had to step back from it. I had several people who were readers, because I had 30 some odd, I think 38 people read it before I went to print, because I wanted to hear from them. Had I shocked them? Had I hurt them? Had I damaged them in some way? Was it too much? Was my story too much? And some of them, probably half a dozen of them, said I couldn't read it. I got to the second story and I had to put it down. And what I found was most interesting was I had a couple of people reach out to me after reading it with somebody who I hadn't talked to in 30 some odd years. They were like a neighbor of mine, and had read it and said, I'm so sorry that I didn't step in.
Oh.
And I thought, you know, I wish I could take that away from you. I can't, because maybe you could have. But what I loved about that was that it woke them up to the fact that we have to stand up and step in for other people, especially those who need our assistance, who are too weak or trapped to be able to do it for themselves. That even when it's hard, even when it brings trouble to our door, we have to step up and step in. Like, that is a requirement, and that's something that I wanted people to be inspired by in this story, was to say, if somebody had stepped up or stepped in for me, they could have prevented half of those stories. And not out of a place of anger or blame, but out of a place of recognition that now we have to do that. Like, we have to be those
Aware and
present and stop it somewhere.
My daughter once told me, Mom, you can't save them all.
Nope.
Because even as a kid, I'd bring home, you know, new child in town, come into my class, come home with me for dinner. You know, animals, I'd bring them home. I did have, we had issues, but I had, compared to this, I had a loving household, okay, a functioning household.
Right.
I won't get into that. However, some of this did kind of take me, I related to some of it with myself, you know, in some of the stages that I have gone through in my life. And I still step in, I see a problem. Ta-da! Here I go, the savior, you know. And
let me get my cape on.
Yes, exactly. And my daughter just goes, oh, Mom, you know. Okay. And I say, I can't help it. It is who I am. I am starting to think first, though, now. So I finally learned that part. Doesn't mean I won't do it, though, you know.
But it's funny. So I was just doing some work with the Connecticut Department of Correction, and we're putting together have put together this unit at the maximum security prison in Cheshire, what they call the Rock. And it's this therapeutic unit where they have lifers who are mentoring young adult offenders, trying to create an opportunity for change, for enlightenment, for connection, for, you know, insight, for all of that, which is really a challenge to the corrections officers and the counselor staff in interacting with inmates in a way that they haven't in the past. And I shared some of my story because my dad I grew up with my dad in prison most of my life, in and out, and what that was for me. And one of the things that he had written to me was, baby, don't ever spend your time trying to save somebody who doesn't want your help. And at the time, I didn't realize he was talking about himself, right? I kept trying that one for years. But I said to these corrections officers and counselors that for those who do want to be saved, for those who do want their help, they have the opportunity to change lives. So it's not about trying to save and wrestle down the alligator that doesn't want to get out of the water, but to be able to invite those people who do want inspiration, who do want change, who do want a second chance, who can be seen and be assisted, to offer them that opportunity, because there are a lot of people out there who have the potential to bring a better self into the world.
Absolutely. And I understand that totally, because just quick story. When I lived in Rochester, New York, and I was working in radio and television. Surprise! And I used to have co-hosts come in and bring people with their story. I had a local newspaper reporter who did this series on inmates at Attica. And he brought a couple of what we call graduates who were newly out. He brought them on the show. And it was fascinating because they talked about how other inmates, they have this program where they all get together and sit in a circle, and they pick one person and they work with that person and break that person down to admitting who they are, what they've done, and that begins the healing process. And this one guy was sitting there talking, and he says, yes, I killed my wife and 2 children years ago. And I'm going, oh my God. But wow, had he come a long way. And because of that intervention,
Right.
it was a religious group, started out as a religious group on the outside, that called themselves Cephas, C-E-P-H-A-S, and they had bought a series of stores in Spencerport, and they had a bakery, a construction company. They had several stores, and that's where the graduates went to learn a trade.
Yeah, kind of like Salvation Army or Goodwill or something.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Same sort of,
And it was, so I was given the opportunity to go inside Attica, dressed down, no makeup, bulky clothes, and be invited to quietly sit in one of these events. And I went back twice because it was the tension, the energy, it was amazing.
So powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, a huge intervention, if you will.
Right.
And to see a man, a huge man, on the floor, on his hands and knees, crying, just, with his heart right there, okay? And showing his soul to all of us.
Right.
And then we all went and hugged him and held him and told him, now you can heal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I tell my girls this all the time, hurt people hurt people. So when we see someone who's, an inmate or some other person who's hurt somebody, they're hurting. This is where that comes from. It comes from hurt. So until we find the basis of the hurt and try to fix the hurt, we're not going to be able to really solve the problem. And I love your story. I was so excited when I had this opportunity to work with Connecticut Department of Correction, because when I was living down in Virginia, I was a volunteer at the county jail in Fairfax County, and I used to go in and do a couple of things. I did anger management and conflict resolution training, and I also went in as part of their Impact of Crime series, which was going in as a victim of crime and talking about the crime and how it affected me to try to reduce recidivism, try to increase empathy, because they've done a lot of brain studies understanding that in having those contacts that people can actually grow their empathetic part of their brain to be able to be less likely to reoffend in a way that would hurt somebody. There's like real brain science around that. So I would go in and talk about my experience, but first I would send them this little write-up, nothing like little landslides, but a one-pager, and then with some discussion questions. And I would come in, and since I've been an instructor before, it seemed like I was instructing. So I would talk to them about the story, and it would just be some of the high points that are in little landslides. And I would say, so one of the questions was, what do you think this person looks like now? And they were saying she's probably on the streets, or she's incarcerated, or she's a drug addict, or she's dead. And I would look at them and say, no, that's me. And so shifting for them the sense that in that pain that they could be something else was a huge shift. But you talk about that big guy on the floor. So my story is that in in one of those classes, this guy, big burly guy, big man on campus, he said, I hate my father. He's a bleep, beep, bleep, 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 SOB, all the rest. And I hate him. He hurt, my family. He left us. He was in jail. He was a drug user. He told me I was never going to amount to anything. I hate him. And there was a group of about 20. And now understand, I'm the only person in the room that isn't an inmate. And we're locked in. We're, guards have us on, cameras.
Watching,
but I mean,
but
I'm locked in there. Yeah, it's going to take a couple of seconds for somebody to get to me if I mess this up, right? So, me, I'm a real intimidating figure, right? 5'3" and 100 and whatever pounds, 120 pounds. And so I'm sitting there in this room with these guys, and I looked at them and I said, So I said, so when do you think you're going to stop being loyal to your dad?
Oh boy.
This guy lost his mind. He was like, and he's jumping off his chair at me. And the rest of the group, because it wasn't at them, it was around them, they were like, oh, she got you, man. Right? And he goes, what do you mean I'm not loyal to him? And I said, that's interesting, because you've both grown up to be who he was, as well as who he told you you would be. So maybe you give up being loyal to his image of you and who he was, and you choose happiness and your own path. And he was like, and then it's like started to like get on him like a really uncomfortable coat, you know?
Yeah.
And when he left, he was like eyes filled up with tears, hugged me, thanked me. And it is my dream, Marilyn, my dream to be doing some keynote somewhere doing a workshop and have that man walk up to me and say, that made all the difference. Because that was such a powerful moment of recognizing how loyal we become to the pain that we've suffered, how loyal we become to the image that was created for us by somebody who was in an undefinable amount of pain and placed that on us as our own lens, and then we operate through it and under it, and then we wonder why our lives are chaotic and painful and damaged and broken and hard. Maybe we give up that little connection to that. So that was a transformational
Wow. Holy
moment.
cow.
Yeah.
You've given us a lot to think about.
I hope so.
And the thing is, you have also given us a living example of what you can do to rise above the pain. And do you still, every once in a while, run into that little girl
Oh, God,
and
yes.
talk to her and say, it's okay, you're fine?
Yeah, I mean, she pops up sometimes. I still have my inner demons. There's friends joke with me. They're like, there's this one place in your life, which we won't discuss on the show, but there's this one place in my life that the demons always pop up. It's just the place that, you know, they just keep coming back to me. And I have to remind myself of all the things that I've been through, of all the ways that I've risen above. But yeah, I mean, there's tendrils, and I think part of it, this woman, this healer who I met with, said to me, it's like you're like a maze of pain, and you shoved things, like you've done so much work, but in places you've like shoved them into these little maze points, in these little corners, and been like, I'll deal with you later, just to get through, right? And sometimes those things either block me or pop up, and then I have to just face them and release them, process them, and that's where good friends come in real handy. Yeah, and coaches like me.
Exactly. Well, this has been a pleasure. We could talk
you.
for another hour.
Hours.
And our time is just about up. You've given us so much to think about.
appreciate
And there's a lot more on her website, which is right there.
Oh, there you go.
And if
Yep.
you'd like to contact Dr. B,
Yes, you
okay?
certainly can.
And
I
why
would love
wouldn't you
that.
want to? She's amazing, as you can see.
Thank you, yeah.
There's the contact
There you go.
information.
Yeah,
This
if
is-
anybody needs help in trying to figure out where their pain is coming from and how to release it out into the ethers so that it's not driving their life, or they've got any of these organizational concerns, yeah, I can help people one-on-one. I can help you in groups, and I just want to, you got to help me with my mission to save, change the world one
she's
life
on
at
a mission
time.
here.
Get out of my way. No, join in. I need partners.
Well, I'd like to thank you very
Thank
much
you
for being on
very
our show. I
much.
knew it was going to be great. I knew it was going to be great.
Be
I also
fun.
like to thank you, the viewer. I'd like to thank our sponsors, too. Without them, they love us, we love them. And as you know, I always finish with a quote that kind of ties in with what we're talking about. So I picked one from Malcolm X on adversity. Every defeat, every heartbreak, every loss contains its own seed, its own lesson on how to improve your performance the next time, or how to improve your life the next time, okay? Thank you so much for joining us. So we'll see you again on From This Corner TV.